We take a look at the repression faced by Telesur's team in Chile at the hands of the police. Argentina's new government announces new economic measures to face the current crisis. And condemnation for the United States after it sanctions a cutting-edge Russian gas pipeline. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. This week, Telesur's team in Chile were the direct victims of police repression, an unfortunate event that showcased how little tolerance security forces have towards journalists who are working to show the reality of the situation in the South American nation 60 days after massive anti-government protests started.
On Monday, December 16th, the Special Police Task Force had orders to stop all protest by any means necessary, restricting mobility and people's right to demonstrate.
We have strategies to maintain control. We are on top of the issue.
Hundreds of carabineros were deployed beginning at 3 p.m. on Monday. The recommendations of the UN, which said that the government must facilitate peaceful demonstrations and reduce their use of force, were blatantly ignored. The police didn't set up barricades, they did not stop traffic, they simply began repressing anyone who would pass by the area, using toxic water on cyclists, giving a fine to a driver who was giving out water to protesters, and eventually they targeted Telesur's team. Our team was located by the Mapocho River on top of some stairs. The story we were working on was not about the police. We were talking about a possible referendum and the recent discovery that the water used on protesters had tested positive for toxic material.
Vamos a escuchar lo que dijeron parte de los profesionales que participaron del estudio.
But in a matter of seconds, just as our story was being broadcast, this happened to us.
Mira cómo se nos acercan. Mira, nos van a mojar. No nos permiten seguir con el despacho al aire. Pero me están
And it didn't end even when we went back on air.
¿Me puede dar una explicación porque no puedo terminar?
La orden era desalojar.
They ordered us to leave when it was obvious we were live, but they didn't care. They kicked us, they laughed at us and mocked us. It was a large group of police.
But we were not the only ones. Health workers who aid protesters on the front line were also targeted by the carabineros.
We are here to help everyone, but the police is attacking us with toxic water as if we were criminals, throwing gases and repressing us.
An alleged defense of democracy by repressing people and controlling public spaces. 2 months into the protests, this brings memories of the darkest years of Chile.
Las Fuerzas Armadas y de Orden han actuado en el día de hoy solo bajo la inspiración patriótica.
Paren, por favor deténganse. Señora, por favor, por favor, de verdad, algo de cordura. Chao, que estén bien.
In other news, Venezuela's oil production is increasing again, despite the economic and financial blockade imposed by the United States. Figures ratified by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries show that crude production in Venezuela climbed from 644,000 barrels a day in September to 687,000 in October and more sharply to 920,000 barrels a day in November. After falling to historic lows, the oil ministry says its measures to stabilize production are taking effect. The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has awarded the Liberators Prize for critical thought on the 189th anniversary of the death of Simón Bolívar. President Maduro said that prizes which stimulate creativity should be given the greatest importance because it is only on the basis of thought and values that a new world can be built. He congratulated Claudio Katz from Argentina, who won this year's prize for his work on dependency theory 50 years later. The de facto government of Bolivia has issued an arrest warrant against the deposed President Evo Morales. Morales is accused of alleged sedition, terrorism, and financing of terrorist activities. This is the latest move by the de facto government to try and keep Morales out of Bolivia as new presidential elections are expected. Morales was forced to flee Bolivia on November 12th after a successful coup by the country's right wing. Now, on Tuesday, Evo Morales gave a press conference in Argentina where he said the coup was carried out because the opposition couldn't stand that he redistributed wealth among all people. Morales also said that he will fight to answer to the call of the indigenous people who demand democracy and sovereignty over their resources.
Presidents of the capitalist system proclaim peace, but I am convinced that there won't be peace if there's no social justice, if the dignity of the indigenous people is not respected. Peace is not assured by setting up military bases or interventions, or stealing natural resources, whether it be mining or oil reserves. And us Bolivians have fought against it, and we believe another world is possible, that Bolivia can exist without the participation of the International Monetary Fund. That was our biggest crime, and this was also a coup due to our lithium, because the future of energy is based on lithium. In no time, it will sustain all our energy.
An Argentine priest facing child sexual abuse charges has been found dead. Police have opened an investigation into Eduardo Lorenzo's death. However, he is suspected of dying by suicide as a firearm was found beside him. According to court files, Lorenzo had an arrest warrant for at least 5 cases of sexual abuse against minors.
The victims are doing well today. They are doing well and are being given closure to this chaos that was Eduardo Lorenzo's suicide. We hold the church and the courts responsible and stress that the only victims are the children who had the courage and the bravery to denounce this pedophile.
Staying in Argentina, the new government led by President Alberto Fernandez has announced a series of economic measures to lift the country out of the crisis after 4 years of a neoliberal government.
Speaking to the media from his new ministry, Martín Guzmán provided details of the proposal for declaring an economic emergency, which the government has sent to Congress.
This bill is the first step to solve the social and economic crisis that Argentina is going through at the moment. We all understand how hard the current situation is, with the growth of poverty and destitution, the problems of food security and hunger. In this proposal, we represent a set of measures that are looking to maintain certain balances aligned with this idea of changing certain priorities. What we look for is to protect sectors which are in vulnerable situation.
According to the officer, the legislative initiative of the executive power will allow the macroeconomic consistency conditions to be restored in order to solve all of the problems within the Argentine economy.
What we want is for the Argentine economy to stop falling, while we protect those who cannot give any more at the moment. And from there, we need the economy to stabilize on the basis of the new conditions, and make it so that Argentina can stand on its feet again.
For experts, the set of economic and social measures that boost the so-called law of social solidarity and productive recovery are clear indicators of the turnaround of the Argentine economy.
I estimate that for the course of 2020, we are talking about 200 billion extra pesos, personal properties that must be incorporated between 80 and 100 billion pesos. There is a third issue that is related to employer contributions, and the fourth issue, which in terms of the law is very generic, which is to give functions to the executive power for the renegotiation of the debt. That has to do with the negotiation of the debt interests.
It's money which won't leave Argentina and which will be designated for the implementation of social policies, such as the food card and the increases for the universal allocation per child and for pensioners. The freezing of public service fees for 180 days and a tax on the purchase of dollars for saving are some of the focal points of the bill.
The extra income won't have a macroeconomic effect. I will say almost nothing. The charge to taxes are to increase the personal property affects a minor sector of the society. It doesn't even affect the middle sectors and the issue of the interests of debt even less, in which they are getting income or leveling tax income that won't affect negatively.
The draft bill, which states the economic, financial, administrative, social, electricity, and health emergency, will be discussed in the lower chamber next Thursday in extraordinary sessions.
We'll take a short break now. Join us in a few. Welcome back. After nearly 2 decades as chairman of the Caribbean's regional airline Liat, Barbadian national Dr. Jean Holder has retired. The board and its shareholders disclosed this on Tuesday. Dr. Holder, who held the position for 16 years, announced his resignation at the annual general meeting in Antigua on Monday. St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves thanked him for his outstanding contribution and service on behalf of shareholders. The Guinean government has moved to ensure that all political players and citizens can prepare for 2020 elections peacefully. Local authorities have released opposition figures who led a strike against a new draft constitution that saw 2 months of demonstrations and 70 people dead. The government is also allowing citizens to march and take part in protests. Political parties are now focusing on planning for next year's polls.
We are still 2 months away from the parliamentary elections, and there are already accusations of fraud. The objective of this ongoing dialogue is precisely to review all the difficulties encountered in the process regarding the parliamentary elections, and, with the Electoral Commission, try to remove all obstacles to achieve an inclusive and transparent electoral process.
The president of Niger is assuring citizens that security will be heightened after the recent attack at a military camp near the border with Mali. During a televised speech, President Mahamadou Issoufou said the ambush, which saw 71 soldiers killed, will never happen again. He added that his government has already put security measures in place to ensure people's safety. Issoufou's guarantees come 3 days after G5 Sahel leaders met to discuss a plan to retaliate. It's been 2 weeks since the deadly incident.
We are at war. We are waging this war. It cannot be repeated enough. For a just cause, the defense of our nation and the integrity of our territory, and that is why we will win it. God willing, whatever time it takes.
Zimbabweans continue to be upbeat in the face of economic hardships caused by extreme droughts and sanctions imposed by Western countries. Citizens have survived through aid and self-help projects. According to the United Nations, nearly half of Zimbabwe's 15 million population still faces chronic food insecurity. The UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food has also warned that Zimbabwe was on the brink of man-made starvation.
26. The project which DCA is implementing together with the World Food Programme is reaching out to 3,974 households, translating to 18,990 beneficiaries. And these are receiving $9 per month per person in a household. And the money is used to buy primarily food, just to improve food security.
Before this program, we were not having 3 meals per day, but we were only eating lunch and supper.
We'll be taking one last break, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. The recent move by the United States to sanction a Russian gas pipeline has been condemned as a violation of international law. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said US sanctions against the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline are an example of unfair competition. The project was almost complete, but the US Senate passed a defense policy bill which includes the imposition of sanctions on companies constructing the pipeline. The bill awaits final approval from President Donald Trump.
Moscow and its European colleagues, Paris and Berlin, do not like such actions. These actions are a direct violation of international law. They are the perfect example of unfair competition.
China has taken a swipe at the United States after news that the country is trying to sabotage its technological advancement. Reports say the Trump administration is planning to limit exports of sophisticated technology to adversaries like China. Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang called on Washington to desist from using blockades and restrictions as a way of forcing its selfish agenda. Shuang also reminded the U.S. that its sanctions are and will be ineffective.
China firmly opposes the U.S. generalization of the concept of national security and abuse of export control measures to interfere and restrict with the normal communications and cooperation between businesses. We urge the U.S. to do more for mutual trust and cooperation and not the opposite. No matter whether the U.S. side restrictions, interferes, sabotage, or blockades, this will not cause any huge difficulties for China. Any temporary frustrations will only serve to motivate ingenuity and vigorous spirit from the Chinese people. We have absolute confidence in China's scientific progress and China's development.
Now, more than a simple technological advancement, 5G networks are a revolution in the telecommunications industry. Experts agree that the country that assumes leadership in the world of 5G will have advantages in the areas of defense, telecommunication, and economy over the next decade. China is spearheading the development of the technology, something that has caused serious concerns for the United States.
Ambulances equipped with 5th-generation 5G network technology, live surgeries transmitted online, trains that operate with facial recognition and smart behavior analysis, while the United States and Europe are in the assembly and commission stage of the 5G networks. China is advancing with its concrete implementation of this technology in daily life.
5G arrived very quickly to China. We still use and are very satisfied with the 4G, but it seems that the 5G is still faster and may be a revolution. I'm thinking that I'll soon be changing to a telephone with 5G because of the ultra-fast speed.
From the beginning of its marketing, thousands of Chinese people moved to devices equipped with 5G. In addition, Asian giant companies have already signed 60 contracts for the installation of 5G networks worldwide.
5G has been an explosion in the development of technology. I believe that it will be a great step to advance that will facilitate people's lives. In China, the development of Huawei is especially highlighted, and compared to the United States, we have a great advantage in research and development of 5G. I am very optimistic about the development of our country in that sense.
Under the pretext of threats to national security, the United States has embarked on a crusade against China's Huawei company. But Washington has not submitted any evidence, and many believe that the true objective of the White House is to prevent the Asian giant from leading the deployment of the 5G.
The accusation of the so-called security trap manufactured by the United States against Chinese technological giants like Huawei and ZTE is absurd. The United States uses security as an excuse. So I want to ask, what is the security standard? Who should be judged? Where is the evidence?
Despite the defamatory campaigns and the provocation from the US, China maintains its overpowering pace at the forefront of 5G development, a network that by 2035 will generate $3.5 billion.
India's Supreme Court has turned down a plea to stop the implementation of the new citizenship law. The court ruled that it will hear the petitions challenging the constitutionality of the legislation in January next year. The law, which came into effect last week, makes it easier for non-Muslims from the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan who settled in India prior to 2015 to gain citizenship. It has since sparked protests as many say it effectively ostracizes 14% of India's Muslim population.
The court has issued a notice. It has refused to give a stay to the act because it has not been completely implemented yet. Some rules will be required to implement it. When the Supreme Court said the same, the Attorney General said that rules will be framed and will be published in the leading newspapers, so that the general public can understand it better.
Meanwhile, protesters have vowed to continue demonstrating until the law is repealed. Dozens rallied at Jamia Millia University in New Delhi, despite the government's ban on large gatherings in other parts of the capital.
Because now this is a huge protest, because it's a matter of our existence now. They are questioning our citizenship, that we belong to this country or not. That's why this is happening, the huge protest right now.
Tuesday marked 5 years since Cuba celebrated the return of the Cuban Five. The nation tuned into their television sets as the anti-terrorism intelligence officers were released from US prisons and flown home after a 16-year struggle. The freeing of the five was integral to the reopening of diplomatic ties under then-President Raúl Castro and Barack Obama. While in confinement, the US attempted to get the men to renounce the revolution, but were never successful.
The five are back. Thank you, Cuba. Thank you to our people for the struggle of so many years. They did not abandon us. Thank you, Cuba, for the bottom of our hearts. One thing that will never change is the unquestionable loyalty, fidelity of the five to our revolution, to our people, to Fidel, to Raúl, and to Díaz-Canel. Thank you very much to all of you. Long live the revolution. Long live Fidel.
These people bestowed upon them the distinction not only of heroes, but of admired sons who we are eternally grateful for their example and for having decided without any hesitation to place themselves on the side of duty and to put above their aspirations and personal dreams the greater interest of the good patriots, which is the defense of their country and their socialist revolution.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.